Hey everyone, welcome to another lecture. It's our 14th lecture and I have divided the 14th lecture into two parts, part 1 and part 2. It is the part 1 of 14th lecture and the topic of this lecture is coordination and response. If we talk about the objectives of this lecture, in this lecture we will talk about coordination and response. We will also discuss the nervous control in human and sense organs. So these two topics are those which we discuss in part 1 and other topics will be discussed in part 2 of lecture 14th. So firstly we will talk about the coordination. What is coordination? So coordination is the way all the organs and systems of the body are made to work efficiently together. So coordination is the process or the way through which different organs or the systems of the body work together and they work efficiently. So this process is known as coordination. Now we will come to the main point, which is the nervous control in humans. So human nervous system is composed of central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Nervous system in humans is divided into two parts, which is the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord, while peripheral nervous system consists of nerves, neurons, and nerves and neurons connect the central nervous system to the rest of the body. What are nerve impulse? So nerve impulse is an electrical signal that passes along nerve cells called neurons. So nerve impulse is a type of electric signal and this electric signal is passes along the nerve cells which is known as neurons. What are the functions of nerve impulse? So its function is to transmit the information to and from the brain. Now we will discuss that what are the nerve cells. So nerve cells are those cells that are also called the neurons and they are adapted to carry electrical impulses from one place to another. Now we will discuss the structure of neuron. If we talk about the structure of neuron, then we see the axons. So axon is an extended and thread long structure along which the electrical impulses travel. So axon is an extended and thread form and it is the structure along which the electrical impulses travel. Normally axons are coated by a layer of myelin. So this layer of myelin is known as myelin sheath and it is an electrically insulating layer which is essential for the proper functioning of the nervous system. What are dendrites? So dendrites are the structures that are also found in neurons. Dendrites' function is to pick up the electrical impulses from other cells. So the function of dendrites include the picking up of electrical impulses from other cells. There is also a structure which is known as motor end plate and it passes the electrical impulses from the neurons to the muscle fibers. Now this diagram is also showing the structure of a neuron. Here we can see the cell body. This one is the nucleus. It is the cell surface membrane. These are the synapse with another neurons. Here are the dendrites. and we have studied about dendrites. Here is the cytoplasm. These are the axons. Here is the myelin sheath, and this structure is the motor end plate structure, and this is the effector muscle. Now we will discuss the types of neurons. So there are basically three types of neurons. First one is the sensory neurons. So sensory neurons are those neurons that carry impulses from sense organs to the brain or central nervous system. So sensory neurons carry impulses from sense organs to the brain. Second one are the motor neurons. Motor neurons carry information from brain to the effectors. Third neurons are relay neurons. And relay neurons connect a sensory neuron to a motor neuron in a reflex arc. So relay neurons are those neurons that connect the sensory neurons to the motor neurons in reflex arc. We will discuss about the reflex arc in next slides. So this diagram is showing that receptors, for example the sense organs, sense a change, then sensory neurons carry the message from receptors to the central nervous system, and then motor neurons carry the message from central nervous system to the effectors, for example muscles and glands. What is reflex arc? So reflex arc is a reflex action. Reflex means it is automatically done without your choice. If we talk about the reflex action is the means of automatically and rapidly integrating and coordinating stimuli with the response of effectors, muscles and glands. So a very well-known reflex is the knee jerk reflex. What is the mechanism of reflex action? When the electrical impulses reach the relay neurons in the central nervous system from the receptors, some impulses are carried by other neurons to the brain, and some impulses are passed on to the motor neurons to the effectors muscles, and the response takes place. The electrical impulses going to your brain are much slower than the ones going to the effectors muscle directly. So this is why the reflex action takes place before you realize it. So we call it uncontrollable. So reflex actions are normally uncontrollable, so they are also called as involuntary actions. What are involuntary actions? So there are two types of actions which take place in human body. First are involuntary actions and second one are voluntary actions. Firstly, we will talk about the involuntary actions. So, involuntary actions are those actions that start at the sense organ heating to the effectors. So, they are extremely quick. While the voluntary actions are those actions that you make the choices to do. Voluntary actions are slower than involuntary action and they start at brain. So involuntary actions are quick while the voluntary actions are slower than involuntary actions. So this diagram is showing the pain withdrawal reflex. So when our hand or our finger touches a surface which is hot, Then the receptor in the skin detect a stimulus, the change in temperature. Secondly, the sensory neuron sends impulses to the relay neurons. Here we can see the sensory neurons are sending impulses to the relay neurons. Then motor neurons send impulses to the effectors. So effectors then produce a response. So muscles contract to move hand away, and then we move our hand away. So it is known as the pain withdrawal reflex. This is the whole process of reflex action. Stimulus give message to the receptors. Through receptors, message is transmitted to the sensory neurons and then towards relay neurons. Through relay neurons, then message is transmitted to the motor neurons and then effectors. And in the last, effectors show the response. What is synapses? As we know that neurons never touch each other. So the junctions or gap in between them are called synapses. So synapses are the junctions or gaps in between the neurons. Electrical impulse travels along the first axon. Synapses ensure that the impulse only travel in one direction, and it avoids the confusion within the nervous system if the impulse were traveling in both directions. So synapse is a junction between two neurons. So in this diagram we can see axons which are in presynaptic membranes and dendrites which are in postsynaptic membrane. These are the neurotransmitters and this is showing the neuronal synapse. Now we'll talk about the structure of eye. As we know that eye is a sense organ. It contains the receptors that are sensitive to the light and color. So the receptor cells that are sensitive to the light are called the rod cells, while the receptor cells that are sensitive to the color are called the cone cells. So eye is a sense organ and it contains the receptor cells. The receptor cells that are sensitive to the light are called the rod cells, while the other ones that are sensitive to the color are called the cone cells. This diagram is showing the structure of eye. Here we can see the cornea. This is iris. This structure is showing the pupil. Here is the lens of the eye and these are called the ciliary muscles. And this area is showing the suspensory ligaments. Here is the sclera of eye. This white area is showing the retina. This is the fovea and here are the optic nerves. Now we will discuss the structure and function of the eye. So cornea is the structure in an eye which is transparent and it is like a transparent lens and it reflects or bends light as it enters the eye. Iris controls how much light enters the pupil. Lens is a transparent disc and that can change the shape to focus light onto the retina. Retina contains light receptor cells. Rods detect the light intensity and cones detect the color, as we have described this feature earlier. Fovea is the area of the retina with the highest concentration of color cells or cones. Optic nerve is sensory neurons that carries impulses between the eye and brain, while pupil is a hole that allows light to enter the eye. Ciliary muscles are the ring of muscles that contracts and relaxes to change the shape of the lens. If we talk about the suspensory ligaments, they connect the ciliary muscles to the lens. This structure is called as sclera, and it is tough white outer layer of the eye, and it protects the eye from damage. So all of these are the structures of eye, and here are the functions of these structures. I hope it's clear now. What is accommodation? So accommodation is how the lens changes shape in order to fine focus the light directly onto the fovea. It does so by bending or refracting incoming light rays so that it converts onto the fovea. So accommodation it is the process that how the lens changes shape in order to fine focus the light directly onto the fovea, and it does so by bending or refracting the incoming light rays so that it converges onto the fovea. Light rays from a distant object are parallel, so it takes less effort for the lens to focus it, while the light rays from a close object are divergent, so that it takes more effort for the lens to focus it. So light rays from a close object are divergent, and it takes more efforts for the lens to focus on it, while the light rays from a distant object are parallel, and it takes less effort for the lens to focus it. So accommodation is also known as focusing, and if the position of object is nearer, then the ciliary muscles contract, suspensory ligaments slackened, muscle tension on the lens is low, and lens shape become fat. If position of object is distant, then the ciliary muscle relax, suspensory ligaments stretched, muscle tension is high on the lens, and lens become thin. So this diagram showing the eye when an object is nearer or close up. So we can see that ciliary muscles contract, and then suspensory ligaments are slackened, and lens become fatter because the object is near. So as a result, light is refracted more by lens to focus on near object. So there is another diagram which is showing the eye when an object is far away. So in this diagram, we can see the ciliary muscles which are relaxed now. Lens become thinner, and suspensory ligaments contract or stretched. So as a result, light is refracted less, allowing the eye to focus on a distant object. What is pupil reflex? So the pupil responds due to changes in light intensity. This is a reflex action, and it is carried out to protect the retina from damage in bright light and protect us from not seeing objects in dim light. So pupil reflex is a reflex action, and it is carried out to protect the retina from damage in bright light, and it also protects us from not seeing objects in dim light. So there are normally two muscles of the iris that control the diameter of pupils. So these are These muscles are known as circular muscles and radial muscles. So when there is dark light, then the radial muscles contracted, circular muscles relaxed, size of the pupil become wide and amount of the light enters is more. In case of bright light, radial muscles relaxed, circular muscles contracted, size of the pupil become narrow and less amount of the light enters. So this diagram is showing the whole process. Here bright light, so the circular muscles are contracted and radial muscles are relaxed and pupil is constricted. In the presence of dim light, we can see that the circular muscles are relaxed now, radial muscles are contracted and pupil is dilated. So in case of bright light, pupil was constricted as you can see, and in case of dim light, pupil was dilated. In case of bright light, pupil was constricted and circular muscles were contracted and radial muscles were relaxed, while in case of dim light, pupil was dilated, circular muscle was relaxed and radial muscles was contracted. So that's all about the part 1 of 14th lecture. I hope this lecture helped you to understand this topic. Thank you.